first question talks about the pyramid of energy for an ecosystem. Shows us figure 1.1. When you look at the pyramid of energy, it's a graphical representation of the food chain. You have the producer to the primary consumer, the secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and then the decomposer. So here obviously we see that there are just 4 trophic levels represented. And one of the principles of the food chain, one of the principles that govern the food chain is that the transmission of energy or the transfer of energy from one trophic level to another is never 100% efficient. So, which means that as energy is being transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, energy is lost in the form of heat, usually during metabolic reactions like respiration. And every food chain begins with a producer, usually green plant, which absorbs sunlight energy. So producers convert sunlight energy to chemical energy in glucose, which ends up in ATP. So producers, which take up sunlight energy, also do not or are not able to convert the whole sunlight energy into chemical energy. So not the whole sunlight energy that is absorbed by producer is converted into chemical energy by them. Also not the whole chemical energy the producer will get into the primary consumer, because energy is always lost as heat from one trophic level to another. So the ultimate source of energy to the organism in trophic 1, the ultimate source of energy, which is outside the ecosystem, is the sun. It's outside the ecosystem. It's an external source of energy. So we have to calculate the percentage of energy transfer between trophic levels 2 and 3. So if you look at this question is asking you to calculate how much energy has been transferred from here to this place. And it's 822 out of 9,804. So if you're going to calculate percentage here, it should be the 822 transfer over the total amount of energy at the initial trophic level times 100 over 1. And by the time you round off to one significant figure, you have 8% to one significant figure. There have been asked to state 2 reasons why the energy decreases between the trophic levels 1 and 4. I've told you that as you go from one trophic level to another, the amount of energy that is transferred decreases, right? That's what is being said here. Why? We mentioned number 1, that is due to what? To loss of energy in form of heat during respiration. During respiration, energy can be lost as heat. Also, energy is used during movement. So if, for instance, we have the producer, which is a green plant, and you have the primary consumer, which is a herbivore, an animal. The herbivore has to move around to get plant, and in the course of moving, the muscles of the herbivores will use energy. So the carnivore that is feeding on the herbivore will not be getting the whole energy in the herbivore because some energy would have been lost during the respiration of the herbivore. Also for the plant also carry out respiration, so some energy would have been lost from the plant. So the herbivore too is not getting the whole energy in the plant. The carnivore is not getting the whole energy in the herbivore because the herbivore moves around to look for plants and in the course uses energy. So movement or energy is used for movement. So animals especially use energy for movement. Energy is used for other metabolic processes like metabolic processes that involve biosynthesis. So anabolic processes like DNA replication, protein synthesis, use energy. Active transport, exocytosis, all use energy within the organism. So the energy that is transferred from that organism to the next organism in the food chain can never be 100% of what it has. For us to describe the advantages of representing food chains using a pyramid of energy compared with a pyramid of biomass. Advantages of representing food chains using a pyramid of energy compared with a pyramid of biomass. That is, when you look at the representation of a food chain using pyramid of biomass and using pyramid of energy, you compare to look out for the advantages that one has over the other. So when we look at the pyramid of biomass actually takes into consideration the size of the organism. Pyramid of energy takes into consideration amount of energy at each trophic level. But pyramid of biomass takes into consideration the size of organism at each trophic level. The size, the biological mass. What's the biological mass? It talks about the quantity of biological matter in the body of the organism, which includes the biological molecules, the cells, the tissues, and when we talk about mass refers, we have dry mass, we have wet mass. Wet mass involves water, dry mass does not involve water. And when you talk about the biological mass, which is the biological matter, we also talk about those molecules. It refers to those molecules that can be respired to release energy. Molecules that can be respired to release energy. So it's not just talking about the amount of energy in the organism, but giving us more information about how the organisms at the different trophic level can obtain their energy. So we're trying to dissect, we're trying to compare pyramid of biomass with pyramid of energy and see the advantages.
A lot, and you're like, okay, do you have a private tuition? Don't you have? Do you have? And yes, Ajiro Tech do have a private tuition. So by my right, you can see that we have for the EdXL and Cambridge IGCSE, and yes, we do have for all subjects. Okay, all subjects. Okay, the popular ones that's always been in demand is mathematics, English language as a second language. Okay, we have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have um, you know the flagship, which is ICT, just here and there. We also have business studies. So if you're interested for a private tuition, I think all you have to do is send an email to the sales team at ajirotech@gmail.com, and they would reply to you, talk about your time zone, talk about, and the fee is really quite affordable. Really, it's really quite affordable. It's when you look at it across other tutoring service, I think this is the one that's quite affordable, and you get the very best of service. We also have for the E levels as well, and also for the EdXL. So we have for the Cambridge E levels and EdXL E levels. Okay, and we have also across the subject mathematics, which is usually the hot cake when it comes to E level, mathematics and chemistry, and then biology. These are usually one of the ones we have in demand always, all the time, even physics, for E level. So all you have to do, if you're watching this right now and you are interested for a private tuition, then you can do yourself a solid, okay, and send an email to the sales team at ajiro@gmail.com, and they will reply to you.
So the pyramid of biomass provides, it provides precise information about energy transfer, or loss. Because it shows us the sizes of the organisms at the different trophic level. It shows us how much of energy. Of course, you will expect that a large organism would be able or would contain more energy when you compare with a small. In the same vein, a large organism will require more energy than a small organism. So white pyramid of energy gives us the idea that energy is lost from one trophic level to another. The pyramid of biomass gives us a more accurate information about how energy is transferred based on the size of the organisms. Also, because pyramid of biomass takes into consideration the size at different trophic levels, size of organisms at different trophic levels. It gives us an idea about the rate of reproduction or the growth of the population. For instance, if you look at algae usually have short lifespans, and they are usually uh, flourish, they blossom in rainy season than in dry season. So in rainy season, we expect that the biomass of algae will be large, but in dry season, they will have small biomass. So when you use the pyramid of biomass, the pyramid of biomass is able to show us how large, which is a function of the reproduction rate of reproduction. So they are able to reproduce more in rainy season than in dry season. So the pyramid of biomass provides or gives information, or it accounts for the rate at which organisms reproduce. Because you're able to see the size. Also, it accounts for the lifespan. You see, one moment you are representing it is large, another moment is small. That means the lifespan is short. Like a short while after. One moment is the algae large, another moment the width of our bar, right? Another moment we have something this small. Let's use the diagram we have here. So another moment we have something like this. So one moment we have it is like this. So one moment we have it like this. And another moment we have it like this. The same algae. This is giving us information about the reproduction rate, the lifespan. The biomass will decrease as reproduction rates decrease. And when that happens fast, like when you consider that with time, it gives us an idea of the lifespan. So it accounts for the lifespan. Also, the other time I mentioned that it's possible with the pyramid of biomass to see how size changes with season. During rainy season, large. During dry season. So it also accounts, pyramid of biomass account for seasonal variation or changes or change. Also, we can see that it accounts for the composition. It accounts for the what? The composition of the body of organisms. That is what organisms are made of. and it allows to compare allows for better comparison between ecosystem. When you measure the biomass of, when you compare the pyramid of biomass of different ecosystems, you will be able to see the distinction between the ecosystem. But when you use pyramid of energy, it follows one principle, which is energy transfer from one trophic level to another trophic level. It's not 100%. Energy is always lost. That's pyramid of energy. But the pyramid of biomass, which considers the biological mass, the size of the organism, helps us to compare. Because the pyramid of biomass of one ecosystem be different from that of another ecosystem based on the abiotic factors. Because those abiotic factors, like we talked about seasonal variation, would affect the biomass of the organisms there. A new species was introduced to an ecosystem, and the figure below shows us the changes in the population as the species establishes itself in the ecosystem. So we have population size of the new species. Now here we notice that at this point it stayed constant at the lower point, then it started increasing. So the number of individuals started increasing, started increasing. It got to this point, it plateaus, even though it was fluctuating, going down, not like a straight one like this, going down, coming back, going down, coming up again. But we have a path that has been mapped out for us here. So let's see what question will be asked about this. Complete the sentence to describe the term population. So this is still kind of outside the graph. Complete the sentence to describe the term population. Population is what? A group of organisms that lives in a particular habitat or area at a given time. A group of organisms of one species, right? You know, when you have a group of organisms of different species, what you have is a community. A group of different organisms, a group of organisms of different species that interact together in a given area, that's a community. But when you have of one species, that is a population. You know, population is a way of defining a species ecologically. Yes, in terms of the ecosystem, you want to define a species, a group of organisms that live in the same area and interbreed successfully, live in the same area at a given time and interbreed successfully. So organisms that interbreed successfully are species living in the same area or the same habitat at the same time. We have to describe and explain the reasons for the shape of the graph at X. So the shape of this graph here tells us that the population size of the new species increases. So what are the factors that can make the size of a species to increase? When there's availability of food, when there are no predators, or low rate of predation, no natural disaster, no bad climate, no disease, this can make the population of a species to increase. So in terms of description, the population size increases when you get to this part. You can see that just a small portion of X here, we have it what no increase. It plateaus, right? Here, but it increases and then plateaus. Increases and plateaus. That's the description, based on what you can observe from the graph. Population size increases and then remains constant or plateaus. And what's the reason for that? Can we go to the explanation, because we're asked to describe and explain? The explanation for that, for why it increases, let's pick for increases now. Of course, we can say that there was increase because the number of individuals born exceed the number of individuals that are born exceed the number of individuals that die. That is, birth rate is greater than death rate. That's another factor here. You can also say that there is abundance, there's abundance of food. There's abundance of food and other resources. And other resources that enhance survival. There's abundance of food and other resources that enhance survival. There are no or less predators. There are no diseases in the population. These are the reasons why. What are the reasons why we could have it now becoming constant? Why did it plateau? Of course, at that point where it plateau, more like remain constant, no noticeable change, because more like we can say there is an equilibrium there, right? No noticeable change at that point because the number of deaths is equal to the number of So obviously, death rates now matched up with birth rates. And what could lead to death? Diseases, competition. So we could say that the reason why the plateaued, why there was now equilibrium between death rate and birth rate, was because the resources became limiting. Resources become limiting. You can say new diseases appeared that can also make death rate to match up with birth rate. So new diseases appeared. Predation increased. So as a result, death rate and birth rate become equal. We have equilibrium between them. So here you have been able to give more than 5 points. 1 for the description, 1 mark. The number of individuals born exceed the number of individuals that die, 2 marks. There's abundance of food and other resources that enhance survival, 3 marks. Of course, there are less predators, 4. There are no diseases, 5. And for the plateau, the reason why death rate and birth rates became equal, resources become limiting, new diseases appear, predation increased. So those factors that we have sent at the beginning when the population size increased, and those factors appeared to increase death rate, to make death rates match up with birth rate. So let's go to the second question. Question 2, which has to do with the distribution of in the retina, the receptor cells, the cones and the rods. So let's look at this graph. The graph shows us the distribution of the cones and the rod between the fovea, the blind spot. We have the dark line showing us the rods and the dashed line showing us the cones. I'm only looking at this graph. Generally, we can see that in the fovea, there is a high peak for cones. So this region here represents the fovea. This region here. Okay, so the region pointed to by the line represent the fovea, and that's where we have a peak for the cones, suggesting to us that there will be a higher concentration of cones in the fovea. So overall, when we look at it, first is the fact that we see that there is a higher concentration of cones in the fovea. Overall, too, we can see that there are more representation for rods than for cones. So meaning that there are more cones, there are more rods rather. There are more rods. Since the question asks us to describe, there are more rods. There are more rods. That's generally from a general outlook, right? From a general outlook, there are more what? There are more rods than cones. It's obvious. Or you say there are less cones than rods. And we also saw that from the general overview that at fovea, there is a what? There is a peak. There is a peak for cones, which suggests that we have what? Highest concentration of cones here, highest number or highest concentration. So highest number based on what is on the y-axis, highest number of cones at the fovea. Another thing we see here is that on both sides of the fovea, we have the rods peaking or increasing. And as you can see, the rods increase towards the fovea. So there are two peaks. There are two peaks on, or we say, rods peak rods have a peak each. Rods have a peak each. Okay, as you can see, okay, there's another peak which is also on. So here we can see a peak here, and there's another peak here. But then we can say that it increases, rods increase in number towards the fovea. You can see from here it's rising, increasing from here towards the fovea. So rods increase in number towards the fovea. Rods increase in number towards the fovea. Rods increase in number towards the fovea. Another very glaring point to see there is that, of course, there are no rods. There are no rods present in the fovea. No rods present, as we know, of course, no rods present in the fovea. Also, there is an almost the same number of cones outside the fovea. You see this in the graph, right? That the concentration or the number outside the fovea is almost the same on both sides. Almost the same. And of course, when you look at the left-hand side of the fovea, rods greater on left-hand side of fovea, then you check the number of rods on the left-hand side of the fovea. From here down to this point, the number of rods on the left-hand side is greater than what you see on the right-hand side of the fovea. Look at it from here. The number we see here is higher than the number we have here. So on the left-hand side, the number is greater. If there are more, there is a greater number of rods on left-hand side of fovea. Let's go to the next one.
A lot, and you're like, okay, do you have a private tuition? Don't you have? Do you have? And yes, Ajiro Tech do have a private tuition. So by my right, you can see that we have for the Edexcel and Cambridge IGCSE, and yes, we do have for all subjects. Okay, all subjects. Okay, the popular ones that's always been in demand is mathematics, English language as a second language. Okay, we have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have the flagship, which is ICT, just here and there. We also have business studies. So if you're interested for a private tuition, I think all you have to do is send an email to the sales team at ajirotech@gmail.com, and they would reply to you, talk about your time zone, talk about and the fee is really quite affordable. It's really quite affordable. It's when you look at it across other tutoring service, I think this is the one that's quite affordable and you get the very best of service. We also have for the E-levels as well, and also for the Edexcel. So we have for the Cambridge E-levels and Edexcel E-levels. Okay, and we have also across the subject mathematics, which is usually the hot cake when it comes to E-level, mathematics and chemistry, and then biology. These are usually one of the ones we have in demand always, all the time, even physics, for E-level. So all you have to do, if you're watching this right now and you are interested for a private tuition, then you can do yourself a solid, okay, and send an email to the sales team at ajiro@gmail.com and they will reply to you.
The longitudinal animals are active at night. Suggest how the number of rod receptor cells in the retina of a longitudinal animal differs from those in the retina of an animal that is active in the day. Of course, we know that rods enable us to see at night. Necessary for night vision. They are responsive to light of low intensity. Rods are responsive to light of low intensity. Allowing us to see at night. So for animals that are active at night, definitely more rod cells, right? There will be more or greater or higher proportion of rod cells in the retina. Also, we know that rod cells, from what I just said, are actually sensitive to light of low intensity or night vision, right? So we expect that here, you see the higher proportion of rod to cones, right? There's a higher proportion of rod to cones, a higher proportion of rod to cones, right? Because um, less cones, because cones are actually because cones are not sensitive to night vision. Okay, so that's that. So let's move on. Talk about so the size of the iris increases in bright light condition. During this response, one effector in the iris contracts and one effector relaxes. So we know that we have the circular muscle of the iris, and we have the radial muscle of the iris. And the circular muscle of the iris contracts to constrict the pupil, to constrict the pupil. So the circular muscle contracts, and that constricts the pupil. And when the circular muscle contracts, the radial muscle will relax because these two muscles are antagonistic. Because these two muscles are antagonistic. So when the circular muscles contract, the radial muscle will relax and the pupil will constrict. Now, for the pupil to dilate, it means that then the radial muscle will be the one to contract. The circular muscle will relax. So during this response, one effector in the iris contract and one effector relaxes. Remember, when we talk about effectors can be muscle or glands, right? So in this case, effector is a muscle, which is the iris muscle. So we're asked to state the name of this response. That's the pupil reflex. It's a reflex action because it is involuntary. We don't have control over it. And of course, the size of the iris increases in bright light condition. In bright light condition, the pupil constricts. So the circular muscle contracts. It's the circular muscle of the iris that contracts. So it's the circular muscle contracts, pupil constricts in bright light. Put the name of the type of action shown by the pair. So you see they are antagonistic. While one contracts, the other relaxes. Just like your biceps and your triceps. When the biceps contract, the triceps relax. When the biceps relax, the triceps contract. They are antagonistic muscle. So we say that's antagonistic, right? Antagonistic. Antagonistic action. The optic nerve contains many neurons. Figure 2.2 shows a synapse between two neurons. Okay, so when you look at the neuron, what are the features of the neuron? You can see that the neuron before the synaptic gap always releases the neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter has its receptor on the neuron after the synapse, the synaptic neuron. The neurotransmitter is expected to bind to its receptor here in order to transmit the impulses to the second neuron. So to state the names of the part labeled A, B, and C, of course, the neurotransmitter is contained in a vesicle. Neurotransmitter is contained in a vesicle. The vesicle uses with the membrane to release the neurotransmitter into the synaptic gap. And then, of course, we can have then the neurotransmitter bind to its receptor. So if we want to look at the A, and what we have just seen is the vesicle, which contains the neurotransmitter. B is the receptor, right? The receptor protein, can I add it? Receptor, and then we have the neurotransmitter. A very common neurotransmitter is acetylcholine neurotransmitter. So we have acetylcholine neurotransmitter. We explain how part C in the figure moves across the synaptic gap. Diffuses, right? Say that C, the neurotransmitter, diffuses across one, the synaptic gap, right, from I would say down concentration gradient, right? Diffusion is always down concentration gradient. So neurotransmitter diffuses across synaptic gap down its concentration gradient, right? So we know that the region of higher concentration, the region of higher concentration is the presynaptic membrane, and region of lower concentration. A region of lower concentration is the postsynaptic membrane that contains the receptor. Okay, so we'll move to the next question. This is taking us to the next question, question 3. So question 3 says that figure 3.1 shows one stage involved in plant reproduction after pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. So the pollen grain has landed, has grown into the pollen tube. So this is the pollen tube. Then it goes down, is expected to grow down and then enter into the ovary to go into the ovule. Right, so that's the pollen tube. Describe the event that occurs after the stage shown here that results in fertilization. So the pollen tube grows and enters the ovule. So pollen tube grows and enters the ovule. It is right there that the male nucleus, in the tube, right, fuses with male nuclei. There are two male nuclei inside there are actually two male nuclei. So the male nuclei in the tube fuse with the female nuclei in the ovule to form the ovule to form a zygote, which grows into an embryo. So actually, one male nucleus fuses with the female nucleus to form zygote. The other male nucleus fuses with the polar body to form an endosperm. The endosperm is a food source, a source of food for embryo. So this phenomenon is called double fertilization in flowering plants. But above all, we have the formation of zygote. So the next question says, a species of plant can use self-pollination and cross-pollination. Suggest reasons for this species of plant to use self-pollination rather than cross-pollination. Because self-pollination have features that will allow the pollen grains of the plant to land on the stigma of the same plant. Right, to land on the stigma of flowers in the same plant. So cross-pollination usually involves pollinators that transfer between plants. So the absence or lack of a suitable pollinator or cross-pollination can make the plant depend only on self-pollination. Okay. Also, plants grow alone, right, or in an isolated area. Okay. Also, if we say self-pollination increases the chance of fertilization and reproduction. Also, for a plant that is use self-pollination rather than cross-pollination, the plant will be such that uses or produces less pollen grains. Produces less pollen grains. Discuss the potential effect of only using cross-pollination in population of plants. Of course, there will be less genetic variation because it's like inbreeding. So there is less genetic diversity or variation among offspring. And of course, what it means is that offspring are more susceptible to diseases because they are less resistant. They are less resistant. Also, there may be decrease in population, which may lead to extinction. Right? Of course, we can say that the offspring are weaker and less adapted to the environment. Here we have to state meiosis produces gametes and is a source of genetic variation. State two other sources of genetic variation in plants. So apart from meiosis, crossing over and independent assortment. So apart from this, of course, other sources of genetic variation include mutation, include random fertilization between sperm and egg, includes random mixing or pollination. You can have random mixing or random pollination in plants, mixing in plants, pollination in mixing in animals, pollination in plants. Right. So meiosis is crossing over independent assortment, mutation, random fertilization, random mixing. Right. Other sources of genetic variation in population could be sexual reproduction, right, involving genetically different gametes. And the fact that we have different alleles or forms of genes. But to describe mitosis and its role in organism. So mitosis involves the division of the nucleus of a body cell into two genetically identical nuclei. Right, so we can say nuclei contain the same number of chromosomes as the parent
nucleus. So afterwards, we should talk about each daughter cell. Each daughter cell produced. Each of the two daughter cells produced. There are two daughter cells also produced, right? So two daughter cells contain two daughter cells produced at the end contain each nucleus. Okay. Number of chromosomes. Number of chromosomes. Yes, remains the same. In daughter cells. What are the roles? Mitosis occurs in growth, right? Mitosis occurs in the repair of worn out tissues and the replacement of damaged cells. Mitosis also has a role to play. Mitosis also occurs in immune response. In immune response to pathogens. So the next question says, state the name of the unspecialized cells that divide by mitosis, stem cells. Cells. Stem cells. So we go to number 4. Number 4. Feeding an organ in an excretory system is what is meant by excretion. The removal of metabolic waste, toxic metabolic waste. The removal of toxic metabolic waste. Removal of metabolic waste that are toxic to the organism. That are toxic to the organism when they accumulate. When they accumulate or become excessive. We have examples like CO2, urea, uric acid, etc. The name of the substance is excreted by the lungs. That's the carbon dioxide. So when you look at the kidney, this is the medulla, and this is the ureter. So we have the cortex, ureter, and medulla. Move on here. The diagram of the nephron. This is the arterial, the afferent arterial that goes into from the capillaries glomerulus, the Biomass capsule. So what are we asked? This is the collecting duct. And the blood, the urine rather, goes to the pelvis from here. So describe and explain the difference in the composition of the fluid in glomerulus, Biomass capsule, and collecting duct. So X, which is the glomerulus, capillaries. X contains blood rich in waste product like urea. Like urea, excess water, so if you look at it, there is filtration of waste product into Y, which is the Biomass capsule. However, large proteins and blood cells remain in X. Because they are too big to pass through the wall of X. So we can say that water, some glucose, and waste product of metabolism make up the fluid in Y. The fluid is known as the glomerular filtrate. Right. Y also contains mineral ion. So we say that glucose, some water, and iron are majorly reabsorbed back from Y into the blood. There is no glucose in Z. As a result, there will be no glucose in Z. Or we can say Z contains higher concentration of water and salts, as well as metabolic waste like urea. We say urine, the urine is formed in Z, and urine trickles down into the pelvis from Z. The liver is also involved in excretion, where the liver breaks down excess amino acids because our body cannot store excess amino acids. So the liver breaks it down into ammonia and then converts it into urea. The first thing is it removes amino group from the amino acid, converts it to ammonia, then forms urea. Alright, so the first thing is the deamination, the removal of amino group or a main group from amino acid. That's called what? Deamination. Because two ways that the amino acids are processed in the liver. And also the liver can use the amino acids if it's not in excess. You can say metabolism of amino acids. Which is about synthesis. Okay. Now, when we say metabolism of amino acid, it can be breakdown, which is the first one. So generally, this one is talking about metabolism of amino acids. Breakdown, then synthesis. That is synthesis of proteins. Synthesis of proteins like plasma proteins from amino acids. The liver makes plasma proteins.
A lot, and you're like, okay, do you have a private tuition? Don't you have? Do you have? And yes, Ajiro Tech do have a private tuition. So by my right, you can see that we have for the Edexcel and Cambridge IGCSE, and yes, we do have for all subjects. Okay, all subjects. Okay, the popular ones that's always been in demand is mathematics, English language as a second language. Okay, we have physics, we have biology, we have chemistry, and we have the flagship, which is ICT, just here and there. We also have business studies. So if you're interested for a private tuition, I think all you have to do is send an email to the sales team at ajirotech@gmail.com, and they would reply to you, talk about your time zone, talk about and the fee is really quite affordable. Really, it's really quite affordable. It's when you look at it across other tutoring service, I think this is the one that's quite affordable and you get the very best of service. We also have for the E-levels as well, and also for the Edexcel. So we have for the Cambridge E-levels and Edexcel E-levels. Okay, and we have also across the subject mathematics, which is usually the hot cake when it comes to E-level, mathematics and chemistry, and then biology. These are usually one of the ones we have in demand always, all the time, even physics, for E-level. So all you have to do, if you're watching this right now and you are interested for a private tuition, then you can do yourself a solid, okay, and send an email to the sales team at ajiro@gmail.com and they'll reply to you.
Number 5, organisms can be classified by the features and by studying the sequences of bases in their DNA. This is the best way to classify organisms using their genes. This way you can know organisms that belong to the same species. Right. So when we want to classify organisms, we can use their morphology, This one is less effective. You're using their physical appearance, right? And we can also use their biochemistry, which involves genes. That's their base sequence. So figure 5.1 is a diagram showing the evolutionary relationship between some different groups of organisms. Each branch shows the point at which organisms develop new features that classify them as a new group. The point where the branch starts also indicates a common ancestor shared by the new group. So this is basically talking about evolution of species. Species that are closely related have just evolved from a common ancestor. So when you look at this, these ones have just evolved crocodiles and birds. The one that they have scales have just evolved from a common ancestor. Apes and rodents without common feature like hair, they have just evolved from a common ancestor. You see, sharks and bony fish do not seem to be closely related like this and this one. So we're asked here, suggest which visible features are developed at here. If we come to here, of course, we can see that they have an external hairs as well. They are pinna visible. And at B, for this bird alone, we can see feathers or wings. So for A is what gave rise to this, right? To the two of them. B is just to this one event. That's why I'm using what? A. You can see the A, you can see pinna or external hair. Then we have wings, feathers. Let's find the name of the group that share the most recent common ancestor. Two groups, of course, as you can see. Apes and rodents. Apes and rodents. This ancestor gave rise to this. So apes and rodents. One mark. So there's a group with the most similar and least similar DNA-based sequences to crocodile. Of course, most similar will be birds, right? Because both of them have just evolved from a common ancestor. The least similar will be shark. They are far from, actually, they are very far from themselves. That will be the least similar. Far. So, birds and sharks. Then here we have to describe the structure of the DNA. A double-stranded molecule two chains it contains two chains made of four bases A, G, C, and T. Okay. That will say in to say the base A pairs with the base A in one chain, the base A in one chain pairs with C in another chain. The base G pairs with C. The base G, the base G in one chain pairs with C in the other chain. In the other chain. So this should be also in the other chain, right? The point holding the bases in both chains together is hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond. Just outline out the basic message of the early control cell function. Okay, so a specific base sequence. A specific base sequence determines the sequence of amino acids in the protein. So it's a specific base sequence that produces protein. It's a gene, right? A sequence of amino acids determine the overall structure of proteins, right? The structure of proteins determines their function. So proteins function as enzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, receptors, etc. Some masses were spinning on the board and provided with lights from all directions. The board was placed in a clinostat that rotated the board. The board was rotated continuously as the seed germinated and the root grew. So here we have the figure that shows us the apparatus and result after 5 days. So we have the board. Now note that rotation of board cancels the effect of gravity. So these for seedlings continue to grow without bending. Right? We continue to grow straight. without bending. Why? Because the concentration of oxygen here will be the same. Complete sentences to explain the root bond. So oxygen is produced in shoots and root tips, right? It's produced at the tip, bringing about growth at the tip, known as primary growth, at the tip of the shoot and the root, the tip or the apex, the apices. And the oxygen travels down the root by the process of diffusion, that region of higher concentration, here where it is produced, to the region of lower concentration. As the greenhouse rotates, the effect of gravity on all sides of the root is equal, right? This causes the distribution of oxygen in the root to be also equal. Oxygen stimulates cell elongation. That's a function of oxygen in growth. It stimulates elongation of the cell, causing the root to go horizontally. So the root continues to go horizontally like this in the pot. It will not bend. The root would have bent if the greenhouse was not rotating. Because the concentration of oxygen on the upper side would have been more. But when it is rotating, concentration of oxygen on both sides will be equal. The rotation of the greenhouse was stopped, right? So did the change in the bond that we occur in the germinating message. Like we said, the down gravity will be felt when it's not rotating, so it will grow downwards like this. So the root grows and bends downwards, right, towards the direction of gravity. That's what we call positive gravitropism. But that's what there is higher concentration of oxygen on the upper side, which inhibits the upper side. Which stimulates it to grow, which stimulates cell elongation. Now the name of it, tropic response to light. Light is photo, then we go on tropism. Phototropism. Tropism is a growth response. Then photo for light. Gravity, that's gravitropism, the gravity. For water, hydrotropism. That's for water. Chemotropism, the chemical light, mineral ion. To the last part. student observed cells from the plants that are muted. Student explained the expected appearance of the cell. Of course, we explained that the cell would not be erect due to loss of rigidity or to low pressure. So the cells are plasmolyzed. That is, the cell membrane moves away from the cell wall, and cells are no longer thin. I can say this is due to this occurs. This is a result of placing plants cells in a concentrated solution or solution of lower water potential. When the rate of transpiration is higher than rate of water absorption from the soil. Okay, so we'll bring this to an end at this point. I hope this helps you preparing for your subsequent examination. Bye for now.